LiberalViewer presents.
So, welcome to the February 5th edition of LiberalViewer Monday Media Mixup, delayed until Tuesday, February 6th by power and internet outages here in Sacramento. Thanks for finally joining me. I'll be using the dozen best, most newsworthy clips I picked out from the Sunday morning news analysis shows, plus Saturday Night Live, from the big five corporate outlets of ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, and Fox News, for which would be a really good political commentary and media criticism fair use political commentary and media criticism show for you all today. It's been a rough couple days for me with this bad weather. You'll see, I think at least on the NBC News Meet the Press clips, there's all these like high wind warnings Sunday morning, and they were true. Those warnings were accurate. I spent like 24 hours without power and 48 hours without internet, but it's all finally back, and so I can finally do my show on based on the clips from the corporate media here in the United States. I think I didn't do my little air quotes. See, I'm totally off schedule, but I'm still gonna do a good analysis for you on my main topic, U.S. war with Iran. I'm especially going to be taking on this big Republican talking point that the Biden administration has been too weak on Iran, and they contrast something that happened during the Trump administration, this killing of the head of the Quds Force, Qasem Soleimani, and they say that like quieted Iran down, which isn't true, and actually may have made things worse. I finally There's this one clip from the former general, or the general who retired, but at the time was the commander of U.S. Central Command in charge of the Middle East, and there's a great questioning of him by Margaret Brennan. If you look down in the video description, I have summaries of all the clips. You'll get to that one when I pretty much rebut this Republican talking point using clips from NSA or White House National Security spokesperson John Kirby, and from this retired general Frank McKenzie. And then, if you stay tuned all the way to the final clip, you will see that George Stephanopoulos like totally disses Ohio Senator J.D. Vance. And I think he like cuts him off at the end, and it's not because he had some hard break, as I'll show when we get to that final clip. But before any of that, and my main topic and all the news summaries, I want to show you two clips for political commentary. The first for political comedy, excuse me. And the first one is from Saturday Night Live Weekend Update on Saturday, where they reported on the really good job numbers that came from Bidenomics last Friday, over in this clip.
In some great economic news for President Biden, U.S. oil production hit an all-time high this week, and the economy added a surprisingly robust 350,000 jobs. Or as Fox News reported it, are migrants turning your kids trans?
So yeah, there's Saturday Night Live making fun of Fox News for finding some way to like turn the good Biden job numbers under Bidenomics into some cultural issue. But actually, if you look at how Fox News reported the good job numbers last Friday when they broke it, I mean, they didn't say do like immigrants make your kids trans or whatever, but they watch the chyrons, the text in the lower third there on during this 2.5 minute Fox News clip from America's Newsroom last Friday when these job numbers broke. They at the very beginning they do have like good news for the Biden administration for like maybe 30 seconds of the 2.5 minutes, but then the rest of the time they like have this preloaded idea that actually the good job numbers are bad. Because there were a whole bunch of layoffs when, Christmas ended, and that happens every year. And we have this, it's not the Bureau of Labor Statistics, but we have this independent group that says that there are all these planned layoffs after Christmas. And anyway, this is how Fox News actually reported it, which in some ways, in a deeper way is more amusing than what you saw in the Saturday Night Live clip. And I'll talk about that a little more after we watch that clip from last Friday together over here.
And a Fox News alert on the economy. The U.S. adding a surprisingly strong 353,000 jobs last month. Unemployment stays at 3.7%. Along with the surge in hiring, the new year also kicking off with skyrocketing job cuts. What to make of all of it? Edward Lawrence of Fox Business is at the Labor Department. Hi, Edward.
Hey, Dana. Yeah, and this number, 353,000 jobs created, obviously a big one. But it also, the last time that happened was January of 2023, a year ago. Now, the 3.7% unemployment rate, that's bad news for anybody that wanted to see an interest rate cut. Now, you have to take these numbers with kind of a grain of salt. This is a re-benchmarking of the data here, and that means the numbers will be a little bit skewed. And this report is not carried with a lot of weight as the rest of the jobs report for the rest of the year. But you can see trends in this report. For example, government hiring, again, one of the top 4 job sectors of growth. Over the past 3 months, government has hired an average of 40,300 people per month. Again, this blowout report confusing the experts. Listen.
About this 353 headline number just underscores the point I made about the wild seasonal adjustments for the month of January. Again, when we flip the calendar from December to January, the economy loses 3.2 million jobs as all those holiday workers disappear. And the ability of the BLS to measure that with any, fine point is ridiculous. And I think this number will be revised lower.
So there's an underlying weakness that could show up in the next report. Career firm Challenger, Gray, and Christmas found that planned layoffs jumped 136% from December. And the January marked the lowest planned hiring for companies since 2009 when the measure began. Now, we've seen layoffs already, announcements from Amazon, Google, UPS, Macy's daily. Now, the reason, the forecasted economic slowdown and increased costs from inflation, which the president is now back to blaming companies.
But for all we've done to bring prices down, there are still too many corporations in America ripping people off. Price gouging, junk fees, greedflation, shrinkflation.
So in about 30 minutes, I'm going to ask the acting labor secretary about all of this. Dana?
Okay. I'm going to call you so you can explain it to me more in depth. Everyone should follow Edward Lawrence on X too. Thank you.
So yeah, in some ways that was more amusing. The layoff surge from December to January, this career, I don't know what group that was that was pointing out that there are some companies that hire a lot of people for Christmas and then lay them off in January, that they even call them planned layoffs. And they're saying that makes the January jobs report inaccurate. Although one thing they didn't mention is that they also adjusted the December jobs report to add 70,000 jobs. Not only was the January jobs report twice as much as people expected. So yeah, no, there are really good numbers from the economy that is one of the best hopes for Biden's reelection. And and before I finish criticizing that Fox News clip, did you notice when they showed that graphic about where the jobs are partway through there, they misspelled the word education. Don't they have spell check at Fox News? They have private edu-action and health jobs, 112,000 private edu-action and health. So I guess maybe Fox News people need a little bit more edu-action in how things are spelled. I don't know, but I don't know if anyone else caught that, but it's just another piece of the Fox News misinformation machine, I guess. Well, usually it's disinformation. I think the misspelling, they're not actually, that wasn't intentional. So that's misinformation. That's the difference between disinformation and misinformation. Disinformation is intentional misinformation or whatever. Anyway, I'm now going to show you the 5 news summaries from longest to shortest. The longest one was NBC News Meet the Press, Kristen Welker, and then had their big news story as this new NBC poll showing warning signs for President Biden's reelection. And then they talked a little bit about the conflict in the Middle East. That's my main topic. But it's mostly an appearance by Steve Kornacki talking about warning signs for Biden, and that, like I was saying, maybe those good economic numbers, if they continue through the election, will fix some of the problems you're about to see revealed in this latest NBC News poll, which, you know, it's a very long time to the election, so the Biden administration has a while. But if, you know, if we're like August, September, and these were the poll numbers, Democrats would be in big trouble. But it's not August or September, it's February, and I'll talk about that a little more after we watch that longest news summary together over here.
Good Sunday morning. We begin with our brand new NBC News poll, which brings more warning signs for President Biden and his reelection campaign. One of our pollsters tells us we are looking at a, quote, presidency in peril. With the general election just 9 months away, President Biden has declined on every measure since 2020, is struggling with key elements of his base, and now trails former President Donald Trump by wide margins on the issues voters say are most important to them. Joining me now to take us through the numbers is national political correspondent Steve Kornacki. Steve, these are some truly stunning numbers.
They really are, Kristen, and let's just start with the bottom line. When you ask folks, hey, if it's the general election and it's Trump versus Biden, in our poll, Donald Trump now leads Joe Biden by 5 points. Compare that to the last time we polled back in November. Trump was ahead then, but it was only by 2 points. And it's even more significant when you look at it this way. Over time, we have been testing for 5 years now, going back to 2019, a Biden-Trump matchup. Remember, 2019, 2020, Joe Biden led. He led big in every single one of our polls. For the first time in November, Donald Trump polled ahead in our poll, and now at 5 points, this is the biggest lead NBC has ever had in 16 polls for Donald Trump over Joe Biden. And of course, undergirding all of this is this question of, he is the incumbent, Joe Biden. We ask voters, what do you think of the job he's doing? And look at that, Kristen, 37% approve and now 60% disapprove.
And we should say that is the lowest approval rating since former President George W. Bush's second term.
Yeah, and it's put that in further context, too. Bush in his second term wasn't running for re-election. Yeah. Here's the presidents who were running for re-election in our poll starting their re-election year. What was their approval rating? Bush was over 50. He won. Obama was almost at 50. He won. Trump 4 years ago was 46. He lost. Look how low Biden's number is compared to those predecessors at this point.
Their number's all much bigger than President Biden's.
It shows you the improvement Biden has to make here in the coming months. The issues that are driving this, too, the economy, no surprise, we've been talking about it, but look at that advantage for Trump, 22 points. Wow. And securing the border here, folks, say very important, Trump with a 35-point advantage.
The economy is so striking, Steve, because jobs are up, inflation is down. Voters aren't giving him credit for that, clearly.
Yeah, there are a couple areas in here, I think, where Democrats see potential opportunities to grow Biden's support. Certainly, they are hoping the economy, folks change their perceptions of it and start rewarding Biden for it. That's what they're hoping, certainly. How about this, though? Also cautionary for the White House. Go back 4 years ago. There was two folks in their 70s running Biden versus Trump. And we asked then, do the candidates have the necessary physical, mental capacity? And it was about even, 41-38. Now, you ask it, 46% say that Donald Trump does. Just 23% when it comes to Joe Biden. And think of one of the central themes of Biden's campaign in 2020. He said he'd be competent. He said he'd be effective. Folks said they believed that in our poll in 2020. One of the big reasons Trump lost, but now complete. Total reversal. 48% say Trump competent and effective. Barely a third say that for Biden.
That's right. He said he was going to bring stability back to the White House.
And now he's the incumbent, and folks are maybe looking at him and maybe looking at Trump as not the incumbent in a different light here. Just a couple other things to get through. On the foreign policy, again, Israel, Hamas, center stage in the, in the world picture right now. Overall, big disapproval for Biden on foreign policy, particularly on Israel, Hamas. That's particularly acute among the youngest voters, 18 to 34-year-olds. We have them tied, Trump versus Biden, and a lot of those Biden voters, 18 to 34, They say they don't like Biden. They just don't like Trump more.
It's this type of erosion among these key groups that really worries Democrats.
And it is the area, too, we say, where Democrats think there might be opportunity. They think they can get more young voters motivated to vote, maybe not by being for Biden, but by being against Trump. This is one area they think they can improve on and maybe make this race a little different. But the other one to key in on, too, independents. Trump look at that with a 19-point advantage. Also, keep in mind, that shows you a lot of independents look very open to potentially another choice if something were to emerge. And also among white voters, Trump with a big lead, black voters, Biden with a big lead. But want to point this one out, Hispanic voters.
Wow.
Trump with a 1-point advantage. We've been asking, would those gains he made 4 years ago stick? Our polls suggest they certainly have, and they've maybe grown. And we did ask this question, Kristen, if one of these cases this year ends in a conviction, a felony conviction for former President Trump, would that change your vote? 45% said in that scenario, they vote for Biden, 43% for Trump. This is also something the Biden campaign obviously hoping for, although it's a long history in polling of asking folks about hypotheticals and them actually reacting a little differently when it actually happens.
A little bit of a game changer, but still incredibly close.
Very.
Steve Kornacki, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. We want to turn now to the Middle East. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is traveling to the region today. His 5th trip there focused on high-stakes diplomatic talks. It comes after the U.S. helped launch strikes against Houthi targets in Yemen overnight, and after it bombed 85 targets in Syria and Iraq Friday. Retaliation for a drone attack that killed 3 U.S. service members stationed in Jordan. Syria has called the strikes a blatant air aggression. Iraq says they're a violation of Iraqi sovereignty. The U.S. strikes come after more than 160 attacks by Iranian-backed militias on American targets since October, and just hours after the remains of those 3 U.S. service members killed in Jordan were returned home. And joining me now is National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan.
And actually, I don't have a Jake Sullivan clip he was on several of the programs, but I'm focusing, like I said, on this Qasem Soleimani talking point that I took a clip from Meet the Press where Kristen Welker talks to the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, and lets him totally get away with using the Qasem Soleimani talking point without cross-examining him on it at all. That's clip number 8 it's the first clip after the news summaries. So that's the clip I'm showing you from NBC News Meet the Press. I thought that was probably way too much focus on a new NBC News poll you saw from voters polled January 26th through 30th of 2024, which probably has very little to do with how people are going to vote in November 2024. As I was saying before the clip, is that really the top story? I've talked about this. It's not partisan political bias like you see on Fox News all the time, but all of the corporate media has this bias towards reporting their polls as news when they are really not that newsworthy. I saw Fox News, by the way, which does also have partisan political bias, but Fox News spent all this time reporting poll numbers about how all these Democrats, there was like a huge percentage of Democrats that didn't want Biden to be the nominee, but then they were pretty silent when Biden won like 96% of the Democratic voters in the South Carolina primary, which pretty much and then that, not to mention how he got more votes in New Hampshire, a greater percentage of the vote in New Hampshire than Donald Trump, even though he wasn't on the ballot and people had to write it in. So yeah, I think the accuracy of polls in general is been disputed or shown to be problematic over many elections, and especially a January poll for a November election doesn't seem like a top story to me. Oh, and by the way, I don't know if you saw, as I was saying at the beginning of the program, if you looked along the top of that clip, you see here high wind warning, Sacramento until tomorrow at 4 a.m. Well, that was an accurate warning. That's why my show was delayed, because here in Sacramento, Sunday afternoon, lost power, cable, internet, and the power was out for almost 24 hours, and the cable was out for 48 hours. And anyway, but I'm back, and I'm keeping my commitment to do this weekly live stream at a strange day and time. But I appreciate my live viewers who have shown up here. I have 20 live viewers at the moment. You can put your comments in the chat, and I see so far I mostly have comments from yada yada yada. Is that a Seinfeld reference? I saw Curb Your Enthusiasm was back this week for its final season. Larry David, of course, was one of the creators of Seinfeld, and the yada 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 is a way of like not answering or not giving information that's really important. Where you go like, this happened, and yada, 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 I was in jail, and what? Or anyway, so I don't know if that's where that viewer's screen name came from, but I appreciate the comments from yada, 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 and I appreciate the 20 plus of you who have shown up for my live stream at this strange day and time. And anyway, I'm going to keep going through the news summaries. That one was almost 6 minutes long. The next two are like 3 minutes and less than 3 minutes, and they get shorter from there. The next one is Fox News Sunday's news summary, which actually does focus on the conflict in the Middle East, mostly with Shannon Bream doing the introduction, and then they talk to Trey Yingst in Tel Aviv, and it's definitely a biased news summary, but I'll talk about that a little. I've been talking too long as it is, so I'll talk about that a little more after we watch that Fox News Sunday news summary together.
Hello from Fox News in Washington. The U.S. has carried out a series of strikes in 3 countries over the past couple of days, so let's get you up to speed. Friday, U.S. military forces launched retaliatory attacks in Iraq and Syria, landing more than 120 strikes on 85 targets all across the region. That, of course, in response to an Iranian-backed drone attack in Jordan that left 3 U.S. troops dead. The U.S. attacks are targeting proxy groups across the region. For now, 2 locations that were hit remain undisclosed. As you know, Iran has long funded groups in the region, ranging from Hezbollah in Lebanon to the Houthis down in Yemen. Now, since the start of the Israel-Hamas war, U.S. troops in the region have been under fire from Iranian-supported militias, facing at least 166 attacks in that time, leading us to where we are today, with Friday's retaliatory strikes just the first, we believe, in a series of large-scale attacks. In a moment, we'll talk with John Kirby from the White House and Republican Senator Lindsey Graham. But first, we turn to Trey Yingst live in Tel Aviv with the latest on the series of U.S. strikes in the Middle East. Trey?
Shannon, good morning. The Middle East remains on the brink of a much broader conflict after the U.S. response to continued attacks from Houthi forces in Yemen and the response to that drone attack last weekend that killed 3 American soldiers. Friday evening, the United States striking back against Iran and its proxies in Iraq and Syria. 85 locations hit with 125 precision munitions, according to U.S. Central Command. The targets, control centers and weapons storage facilities, some affiliated directly with Iran's Revolutionary Guard Corps' Quds forces, others with Iran-backed militias. In a statement overnight, U.S. Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin hinted at further retaliation, saying, quote, "The president has directed additional actions to hold the IRGC and affiliated militias accountable for their attacks on U.S. and coalition forces. These will unfold at times and places of our choosing." The Iraqi government claims 16 people were killed during U.S. strikes against locations in their country and condemned the action as a violation of Iraqi sovereignty. At a bombed-out location along the border between Iraq and Syria, residents expressed frustration with Iran-backed militias hiding among civilian areas.
We urge official bodies to put an end to this military existence inside residential compounds.
And this weekend, new reaction to the strikes from Iranian officials in Tehran.
We naturally condemn any move against the resistance front, and we reject and condemn these attacks that will naturally lead to the flames of the resistance.
The region now waits to see if there will be further American strikes in the Middle East or a response by Iranian proxies. Shannon?
Trey Yingst reporting for us from Tel Aviv. Thank you, Trey. Joining us now, Admiral John Kirby, National Security Council Coordinator.
And I will have a clip of Admiral John Kirby. He actually refutes the big Fox News Republican talking point that I'll show you from the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, before that. But that news summary is fairly indicative of the way this whole conflict has been covered on Fox News recently, especially that graphic with 166 attacks. I don't remember during the Trump administration where they were like talking about all the attacks on U.S. forces from Iranian proxies, and that actually happened, as John Kirby will point out to Shannon Bream in that clip number 9. As I said, down in the video description, you can see summaries of all the clips I'm showing you, and that Fox News Sunday, fairly biased against the Biden administration news summary, was clip number 4, and it's actually ABC News This Week with George Stephanopoulos, I think, does a better job of more fair and balanced, if I can use that phrase, fair and balanced news about the U.S. airstrikes in the Middle East. You'll see an introduction from the host, the titular host of This Week with George Stephanopoulos. George Stephanopoulos himself is there, and then their reporter Marcus Moore, who I don't think is in Tel Aviv. Trey, I'll have to look at the clip with you, but I'm pretty sure Marcus Moore is like somewhere more neutral than Tel Aviv, because, you know, Fox News famously kind of reports the Tel Aviv point of view, the Benjamin Netanyahu point of view. They're very pro-Bibi, and you know, President Joe Biden isn't a big friend of Bibi Netanyahu, which is one of the things that is the subtext of this whole conflict. But maybe that's the difference between the news summary you saw from Fox News and the one you're about to see from ABC, that I will talk about with you a little more after we watch that clip together over here.
Good morning and welcome to This Week. Retaliation for strikes against U.S. forces and Middle East shipping have continued through the weekend. The U.S. and Great Britain hit dozens of Houthi targets in Yemen Saturday, following Friday's strikes against 85 targets in Iraq and Syria. The big question now, will this spark a wider war in the Middle East or work to contain the conflict? We'll ask President Biden's National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan after this report from Marcus Moore in the war zone. Good morning, Marcus.
Well, George, good morning. We are right along Jordan's border with Syria. That's Syria just in the distance behind me, and tensions have been high here as officials confirm that U.S. and British forces, supported by 6 other countries, unleashed a new large-scale attack on Houthi targets in Yemen, including deeply buried storage facilities and air defense systems. American F-18 fighter jets and warships with the Eisenhower Carrier Strike Group firing guided Tomahawk missiles, striking 13 different locations. Now, U.S. Central Command forces also saying earlier that they struck 6 Houthi anti-cruise ship missiles prepared to launch, and destroyed 12 Houthi drones on Friday, either mid-flight or ready to be launched from Yemen. And as you know, these drones are a serious threat to international trade transiting through the Gulf of Aden. And U.S. officials saying that those strikes in Yemen are not linked to the retaliation for the January base attack. After several days of warning, the U.S. retaliating against Iran-backed proxies for the drone strike that killed 3 service members at an army outpost in Jordan a week ago. Iraqi officials say 16 people were killed, 25 wounded, while a Syrian human rights group says 29 members of Iranian-backed militias were killed there. The White House is signaling that more strikes are coming, but they don't want an escalation. Iraqi and Syrian governments quickly condemning the retaliation, calling it a violation of sovereignty, and they said that it threatens stability in the region. And George, concern about escalation is growing among many here in the region, and the belief here is that as long as Israel's bombardment in Gaza continues, stability in this part of the world will be threatened, George.
In fact, Marcus, we have heard from the Houthis. They're vowing to respond.
Yeah, that's right. They have vowed to keep up their attacks on those ships in the Red Sea, and that this will continue as long as the war in Gaza is happening. And the Houthis have said that they will only stop when a ceasefire is declared. And George, it is worth noting that these groups have still been able to carry out attacks despite the U.S. airstrikes. George.
Marcus Moore, thanks. Let's bring in the President's National Security Advisor, Jake Sullivan. Jake, thank you.
Yeah, and I won't have a clip of that Jake Sullivan interview because, like I said, the final clip is George Stephanopoulos totally dissing Ohio Republican Senator J.D. Vance when he is giving these totally bogus answers to his questions and like cutting him off at the end. That's the final clip. Clip number 12, but we still have a couple more news summaries, and I think you saw what I was talking about before I showed the clip. Marcus Moore was actually in Jordan near the Syria border, which is, remember, last week I was talking about how these 3 U.S. Soldiers were killed in this outpost right in the northeast corner of Jordan, right where it intersects with Syria and Iraq. And that was a better news summary than you got from Fox News Sunday about the tension between the U.S. and Iraq, because, you know, the Iraqi government is very pro-Iran since we deposed Saddam Hussein, who was the Sunni leader of Iraq, and now a whole bunch more of the, you know, now it's much more Shia pro-Iran dominated. Remember all the Shia militias all throughout Iraq, and the reason there are U.S. troops in Iraq right now, like 2,500, like with the quasi-consent of the Iraqi government, is because Iran and the U.S. had a common enemy to fight, ISIS, the Islamic State, which was a foe of both the United States and Iran, and that's what those troops are doing in Iraq, and now it's all falling apart because of the Israel versus Hamas war in Gaza. And as you saw Marcus Moore report, it's going to keep going as long as that conflict keeps going. That's actually what's driving this, not Biden's weakness, as you'll see Republicans claim, and was kind of reported in the Fox News Sunday news summary, even though it was more partisan political propaganda, because as we all know, Fox News was created to be the partisan political media outlet of the Republican Party by Roger Ailes, as described by Gabriel Sherman in this book right here, The Loudest Voice in the Room. You can read that book and see how Roger Ailes created Fox News for that purpose, and I've made hundreds of Fox News bias videos over the years. You can go to my channel on YouTube, youtube.com/LiberalViewer, and one of the playlists I have listed on the channel is my Fox News bias playlist that has hundreds of examples of how Fox News is not really a journalistic organization, although occasionally some journalism does occur there, but more a partisan propaganda outlet for the Republican Party. But I digress into something I say over and over again over many years. I apologize to my regular viewers for having to listen to that same thing over and over again, but it's important. It's important to understand the difference between Fox News and the other 4 corporate media outlets that I am featuring in my live stream. And now I'm going to get to the last 2 news summaries. One's a little more than a minute, the other's a little less. CBS News Face the Nation, Margaret Brennan talks about the immigration bill, the Middle East conflict, and also the new bipartisan bill in the Senate that just broke the text Sunday night. And anyway, I'll talk about that a little more after we watch that news summary together over here.
Good morning and welcome to Face the Nation. We've got a lot to get to with the escalating tensions in the Mideast, but we begin with another challenge facing this country: how to secure the nation's borders and improve our broken immigration system. There is near universal recognition among Americans that the current immigration process is broken, and Congress has struggled for years to come up with a solution that will gain enough support to become law. The House has passed a bill that is a non-starter in the Senate, and we spoke with Speaker Mike Johnson about that earlier this year. But a bipartisan group of senators is expected to unveil their proposal later today. That bill would allow the president to shut down asylum processing during spikes in illegal crossings. It also gives the Department of Homeland Security the ability to expedite deportations. The proposal limits access to asylum and requires cases to be reviewed within 6 months. Right now, there is no time limit, and many cases languish for years before they're processed. Joining us now from Scottsdale is one of the chief negotiators of that deal, Arizona Independent Senator Kristen Sinema.
And actually, that was kind of an interesting interview, even though I didn't take a clip of it, because Kristen Sinema really does not do interviews. But I would point out down in the video description under sources, there's a link to the CBS News Face the Nation YouTube channel where they upload the entire episode, and they also upload the episode in clips, so you can watch the whole Kristen Sinema interview and see what because she doesn't do, I think it was her first Sunday show interview, and I almost took a clip of it, but it doesn't fit my topic. And Margaret Brennan actually asked this really incisive question of retired General Frank McKenzie about the assassination of Qasem Soleimani that I wanted to talk about in conjunction with the other newsmaker clips I'm going to show you. So that's why I don't have a Kristen Sinema clip for you. But if you really want to watch that interview, like I said, there's a link under sources in the video description. And then finally, I want to get to the CNN State of the Union news summary that basically talks about Biden winning in South Carolina, which I guess was breaking news this week that not many of the, I criticize Fox News for not reporting it after they spent so many weeks claiming Biden was weak amongst Democrats based on polls, but an actual primary result, that's not a poll. That's actually people voting. I mean, only 4% of Democrats in South Carolina voted, I guess, but Biden won 96% of them, so that's news anyway. But, I mean, usually the polls don't represent 4% of the actual voters, so it's actual news. And then there's something about the crisis in the Middle East in the final news summary that I will talk about with you a little more after we watch it together over here.
Hello, I'm Dana Bash in Washington, where the State of our Union is striking back as President Biden celebrates his first official primary win in South Carolina last night and warns of a, quote, dangerous and extreme opposition led by Donald Trump. Biden is also facing a growing crisis in the Middle East with enormous security and political implications. The U.S. struck a Houthi missile in Yemen early Sunday morning, a third straight day of U.S. strikes against Iran-backed militias in the Middle East. Not clear yet whether Iran will retaliate for the U.S. attacks Friday on its proxies in Syria and Iraq, an escalation ordered by President Biden after the deadly attack that killed 3 U.S. service members in Jordan last week. Here with me now is President Biden's National Security Advisor, Jake Sullivan.
So, yeah, as I said, Jake Sullivan was on several programs, and I didn't take clips of any of them because I think I put together some good clips to make my point about the Republican talking point that Biden is weak on Iran and he should, kill somebody in power like the Quds Force leader Qasem Soleimani, like Trump did, because that worked so well, which is totally false. Actually, the CNN State of the Union clip I'm going to show you is a clip of Nikki Haley talking about her possible Iran policy, and she, attacks the Biden policy using sort of this bogus Qasem Soleimani talking point, and then she refuses to say anything negative about Trump, which is why she can't win the Republican nomination. That's clip 11. If you're looking at the clip list down in the video description, I'm about to show you 3 clips that totally destroy the Republican talking point that Trump was strong on Iran and he killed this Quds Force leader Qasem Soleimani, and that's why Iran was quiet until Biden showed his weakness, and now we have all these problems. That is like a total false narrative, and I'm going to refute that in just a second. I just want to double check. I still have like 20 live viewers, and I appreciate. Oh, I see. I have a live viewer from Croatia who can't usually watch, so I guess that's a benefit of doing the live stream on a weird day and time. And oh, and I see Dodge St. Regis appreciated me in the comments, and I apologize to Dodge St. Regis for pronouncing it Doge St. Regis in a previous live stream. That was a mistake that, I don't know, maybe it's a whole like Dogecoin thing. Was that what it was? I don't know. No, sorry about that. And anyway, I wanted to acknowledge my live viewers one more time, since you stuck with me through this weird delayed Tuesday live stream of my Monday media mix-up at an odd time and day, and now I'm going to do what I said. So this is a refutation of this Republican talking point I see on Fox News especially, and from Republicans all the time, that President Joe Biden is weak on Iran, as opposed to what former President Donald Trump did, where he assassinated this Iranian Quds Force leader, Qasem Soleimani, although it wasn't a strike in Iran, which is what a lot of Republicans are calling for. They want us to strike targets in Iran, but actually even the Trump administration didn't strike this Quds Force leader, Qasem Soleimani, until he was on a trip to Iraq, and they killed him when he was in Iraq. And it actually didn't turn out so well, but Kristen Welker, the host of NBC News' Meet the Press, doesn't really cross-examine the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, when he uses that bogus Republican talking point in the clip I'll talk about with you a little more after we watch it together over here.
Before we get to the border talks, I want to ask you about the Middle East. Of course, you just heard me talking to the National Security Advisor about these rounds of retaliatory strikes, which you have been critical of. I want to be very clear, though. What specifically do you want to see, Mr. Speaker? Do you want to see strikes inside Iran?
Well, I do take issue with a little bit of what Jake Sullivan just said. I listened to that interview. It was interesting. We need to make absolutely clear to Iran that nothing is off the table. You know, we maintain peace through strength. That was the Reagan doctrine. That's what President Trump continued, and that's what we have to do right now. We should not be appeasing Iran. That's what the Biden administration has been doing for the last 3 years. We are projecting weakness on the world stage, and frankly, Kristen, that is why our adversaries are acting so provocatively. What we need to be doing right now is turning up the heat on Iran. We need to act to decimate the Iran central bank, the assets that they've held there. We need to lean on international banks to seize the assets of Iranian proxies. We need to put big-time pressure, maximum pressure on their oil exports. There's a lot that we could do to Iran to send a message instead of this appeasement strategy. It's just simply
including
not working.
Strikes, Mr. Speaker? Including strikes, just to be clear?
It should not be off the table. Let me give you just a quick example. You know, in the Trump administration, we used a drone and 3 missiles to take out Qasem Soleimani near Baghdad. That sent a strong message, and it quelled all of the activity there. What we're doing right now, we're using potentially hundreds of munitions to strike close to 100 targets so far, but we're not going right to the heart of the matter. I think that's a real problem.
And of course, the Biden administration has argued they have launched a number of retaliatory strikes against all of those attacks. Let me ask you, though, about your surprise move on Saturday, Mr. Speaker. You proposed a new standalone aid package to provide funding for Israel.
And I kept that playing so you can see that Kristen Welker did not follow up on that bogus talking point. She did follow up a little bit, like saying, oh, well, the Biden administration would say they have done a bunch of retaliatory attacks before now, but she did not try to refute that Republican talking point that you see, especially on Fox News all the time, that the Trump administration killed Qasem Soleimani and that stopped all the attacks. And if Biden would just kill someone important or something important to the Iranians, all the attacks would stop. But actually, that's not true. And there were even more attacks after Trump killed Qasem Soleimani, the Quds Force leader. They didn't, like I said, Trump didn't even do any strikes in Iran. He did that when Qasem Soleimani was in Iraq. And here's the national security spokesperson for the Biden administration, John Kirby, talking to Fox News's Shannon Bream and making that point in response to a question about the supposed weakness of the Biden administration over in this clip.
There are critics who say we're in this position because of the president's actions. They point to things like easing sanctions on Iran's oil industry that allow them to rake in tens of billions of dollars. We know money is fungible. How can we say, or with any certainty, that those funds are not funding these groups that are now taking aim at our soldiers? 3 lives lost, dozens others injured. An opinion piece in The Hill puts it this way. It says, any clear-eyed assessment of Biden's performance in foreign policy, past and present, reveals one consistent thread, which certainly helps explain the dire state of world affairs during his presidency: his unusual commitment to choosing the weakest or least confrontational path. He's talked about being worried about igniting something broader in the region, but is this idea of appeasement sending the wrong signal to folks there who only understand brute strength?
Sure. Look, it's hard to take a look, I think, at what we've been doing over the last 3 years and say that we've somehow been soft on Iran. I mean, more than 500 entities sanctioned, 50 sanctioned regimes. He has bolstered our force presence in the region, including at one point having 2 aircraft carriers there, one in the Med, and one in the Middle East waters. In fact, there's a carrier still there. And in terms of the attacks that we've suffered over recent months, he has increased the aggressiveness of our responses to go more directly after the IRGC. And now he saw what happened on Friday night, and I'm telling you, that's not the end of it. There will be more. So I think we just obviously come to a different place here on whether or not we've been aggressive enough and muscular enough on Iran. Now, you're right. The president doesn't want to see a broader conflict in the Middle East, and we're not looking for a war with Iran, and I'll bet you the American people don't want that either. We're going to do what we have to do to hold them accountable. And it's not like, Shannon, there weren't attacks in the previous administration either, right? After then President Trump ordered an attack on Qasem Soleimani, the head of the IRGC, attacks on our troops and our facilities spiked pretty dramatically, to the point where in late 2020, the former Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, was actually considering weighing the options of closing our embassy in Baghdad. So these groups have been doing this for a while. Let's see. We got the first round out on Friday. Let's see where this goes.
So that's something you don't hear on Fox News a lot. And actually, to Shannon Bream's credit, I'm not showing you the clip, but when Senator Lindsey Graham was the next guest and he tried to make that Republican talking point about how Trump was strong by killing the head of the Republican Guard, Qasem's. I think I was talking about him being head of the Quds Force, but I think the Republican Guard is in charge of the Quds Force, so I think both are true. But anyway, Lindsey Graham tried to make that claim that Trump killed Qasem Soleimani, and that quelled the unrest, and Shannon Bream actually brought up what you saw there from John Kirby, though then Lindsey Graham said, well, but nothing like the 160 attacks that you saw in the graphic earlier, which actually there were a lot of attacks. It's not like, and there were a couple U.S. soldiers killed after the Trump administration killed Qasem Soleimani. So at least I give some credit to Shannon Bream for bringing that up when she was interviewing Senator Lindsey Graham later in the program. And it's good to see that Fox News at least broadcast what John Kirby said in that clip I just showed you, which is kind of what I meant earlier when I was saying that Fox News is a propaganda outlet for the Republican Party. But occasionally some journalism, like incidentally or accidentally, occurs on the channel, and there you just saw it. One of those rare accidents of journalism on Fox News. And oh, I saw that I had a live comment on the program here from Daniel West, who is actually one of my most consistent commenters on the recorded show. And I appreciate all my recorded show commenters and viewers, because it's actually more, it's like 3/4 of the views I get on my live streams come from the recorded show viewers, and the people who comment, I think, push it up the algorithm. I don't know, but I don't really understand the algorithm, but I am happy to see Daniel West here on the live stream, who usually just posts comments on the recorded show. And yes, Fox News has been found liable and had to, in their settlement, had to pay like $1 billion for lying about the results of the 2020 election and whether these voting machines were responsible. And there's even an additional lawsuit still ongoing. So yeah, it's definitely not journalism, even though, as I just said, some journalism does incidentally or accidentally occur on the channel. And I'm going to show you another clip here that is even more incisive on whether the Trump administration killing of this Iranian commander Qasem Soleimani, whether it was good or actually maybe it's causing what we're seeing now. And kudos to Margaret Brennan for asking this question, because I haven't seen this discussed anywhere else, talking about how that killing of Qasem Soleimani, who was like an inspirational, great leader from Iran who was responsible for all these Iranian proxies, he like kept them in line. And now that he's dead, the actual inspirational leader for a lot of the Iranian proxies is Hassan Nasrallah, the leader of Hezbollah in Lebanon. And that may be actually why this big attack happened on October 7th, because Iran has lost some of the control over their proxies that they still fund and train and send weapons to, but they just don't have the operational control they did before Trump killed their inspirational leader, Qasem Soleimani. This is the first time I ever heard that, and it's on CBS News Face the Nation on Sunday, thanks to Margaret Brennan asking that question of the retired general who was in charge of the Central Command, who killed Qasem Soleimani back during the Trump administration, answering that question over here.
4 years ago, they were forces under your command who killed Iran's Quds Force commander Qasem Soleimani when he was in Iraq from Iran. His successor doesn't seem to be quite as influential, and there are some pointing to the leader of Hezbollah now as choreographing the militias. Is this the outcome you expected when the Trump administration decided to take Soleimani off the battlefield?
Well, Margaret, it's important to understand we took Soleimani off the battlefield because we felt he was preparing an imminent attack on our embassy and other locations in the Middle East. So certainly there were long-term considerations, but he was a clear and present immediate danger, and we took steps to remove him from the battlefield because of that. Now, what's developed after that? You're right. The IRGC Quds Force has not been able to get into Iraq and bring people together as Soleimani was, because his successor is a much weaker military leader than Soleimani. It's unclear to me that Nasrallah, the leader of Lebanese Hezbollah, is filling that space. I think the most interesting thing about Lebanese Hezbollah and Nasrallah is the fact he has not chosen to engage in large-scale conflict with Israel right now because of what's going on down in Gaza. And I think that's important to look at. It's like the dog that doesn't bark in the night. That can be important. He's instead chosen to hold back, to observe the situation. And I think that's an important thing that we should continue to take a look at, because they're the largest non-state military entity in the world with thousands of weapons that could cause great pain to Israel. On the other hand, Israel has vast resources they could apply against Lebanese Hezbollah should this war ensue. And I don't think LH wants that war. Now, they may be influencing events in Syria and Iraq. That's just not known to me at this time. I think it's more of a hodgepodge of efforts there, but I do believe ultimately Iran is clearly behind it.
U.S. intelligence.
So, yeah, kudos to CBS News Face the Nation and Margaret Brennan for bringing out that fact. I think in those last three clips I've shown, first Speaker of the House Mike Johnson expressing this bogus Republican talking point that I also hear on Fox News all the time, that Biden is weak on Iran and Trump showed them the brute force, the only thing they understand, when he killed the Quds Force commander Qasem Soleimani, and that stopped Iran from doing anything for so long. And then Biden's weakness invited more Iranian attacks. But no, as you just heard, first from Admiral John Kirby talking about how attacks continued and escalated after the killing of Qasem Soleimani. And then finally you heard there from Frank McKenzie, who was the general in charge of Central Command at the time, that, oh, well, we killed him because we thought he was about to be responsible for an imminent attack, but maybe now that he's dead, this head of Hezbollah, Hassan Nasrallah, he's actually more influential. He's influencing the other Iranian proxy forces like Hamas and maybe even the Houthis to now attack the U.S. and Israel in ways that maybe Iran doesn't want, because Iran traditionally is not looking for a direct confrontation with the United States. So it's actually because the Trump administration killed Qasem Soleimani that there's a greater chance of war between the United States and Iran, because they don't have as much control of their proxies without that inspirational leader. And that is something I hadn't thought about until I saw that final clip, even though I knew that whole Republican talking point that killing Qasem Soleimani showed strength and was quelled any sort of attacks from Iran. That's totally bogus and has never made any sense. But anyway, I do have a couple more newsmaker clips. One is still on the main topic of the possible U.S. war with Iran, and it's from Trump's only remaining challenger in the Republican primaries, Nikki Haley, showing why she is not going to beat Trump, even though she still has a couple weeks until the Republican South Carolina primary, even though Biden just won the Democratic South Carolina primary, but the Republican one is a couple weeks later. Nikki Haley is not attacking Trump strongly enough. Here you'll see her attack the Biden policy on Iran, kind of alluding to the bogus talking point about killing Qasem Soleimani helped, which, as I just showed, it didn't. But she won't in any way say Trump did anything wrong, which is pretty much true of the entire interview. And by the way, down under sources in the video description, there's a link to the entire Meet the Press. Oh, I'm sorry. There's a link to the entire CNN State of the Union program, which you can probably log into using a CNN account or maybe your cable provider. I'm not sure. But anyway, here is Dana Bash trying to get Nikki Haley to say something negative about Trump, but she won't. in a clip I'll talk about with you a little more after we watch it together over here.
Let's start with the U.S. retaliation for that deadly attack on U.S. service members in Jordan. As the former UN ambassador looking at this retaliation, are you satisfied with the U.S. response so far?
Well, I think the first thing is I have to respond as the wife of a combat veteran and, one whose husband is deployed right now. We make a promise to our military men and women that we will keep them safe. We make a promise to the military families. We make a promise to them themselves. The fact that nothing was done after the first strike, the fact that nothing was done after the second strike, it took 165 strikes, 3 soldiers to die, 2 Navy SEALs, and now Biden wants to do something? The biggest issue is this didn't have to happen. Why did it take so long? So let's go back to what started it. What started it was, first of all, he never should have fallen all over himself to get back into the Iran deal. By doing that, he lifted the sanctions. All the money flowed to all of the terrorist proxies around the region. And now we're paying the price of that. And so you look at what's happened now. First of all, I think he should have done something sooner. But first, Dana, first and foremost, put the sanctions back on. You got to put the sanctions back on. Now, I appreciate that he did do something. I appreciate that he's gone after the targets of where the missiles and drones are coming from in terms of Iraq and Syria. I appreciate that what he's doing in Yemen. But if you really want to make a difference and you really want to put an end to this, which is what we all want to do, first you put the sanctions, then you go after 1 or 2 of the IRGC military leaders that are making these decisions. None of this would happen without Iran.
So
you can go and hit their,
Iran?
you can take out their. So what you need to do is if those military leaders are inside Iran, yes, you do it surgically, or if they leave Iran, you take them when they're there. The bottom line is you can take out some of their fighters, they'll just get more fighters. You can take out their drones and missiles, they'll just get more drones and missiles. What Iran responds to is if you hit their money or if you hit their leadership. That's what we need to be focused on, is making sure we go after that to give them the punch that they need.
Your competitor, the former president of the United States, Donald Trump, often says how tough he was during his 4 years in office on Iran. What would you do differently than Donald Trump would do?
Well, I worked closely with him to get out of the Iran deal. I mean, I actually went to, the International Atomic Energy Agency to study whether the Iran deal was working. And when I asked them the questions, I said, how many of the research areas do you inspect? Because we knew a lot of the nuclear production was happening in the research areas. And they said, we don't inspect those. And I said, well, how many of the military installations do you inspect? Because we knew that that's where the production was happening. They said, well, we're not allowed to inspect the military installations. And I said, okay, then what do you inspect? And they said, well, if we get a tip, we give them 45 days and then we go and inspect. And that's when I came back and told Donald Trump, not only do you have to get out of the Iran deal, it's the responsible thing to do. So they don't keep their promises. They've always said death to America. So Trump was right to get out of the Iran deal. We were right to have the sanctions in place. The problem was the sanctions never should have been lifted.
What would you
That's what
differently
gave
than
them
him
all of the
now?
power. I think I would do exactly the same thing. Put the sanctions back on, and I would go after the Iranian military leadership. That's what we need to do to stop what's happening in Lebanon. That's what we need to do to stop what's happening in Yemen and the Red Sea. That's what we need to stop what's happening in Iraq and Syria. This will escalate. That's the problem, is this is going to escalate. And none of this had to happen. They wouldn't have happened if they wouldn't have had the money to do it.
Let's turn to the crisis at the U.S. southern border.
And so, yeah, that was all the cross-examination that Nikki Haley got, even though she kind of made that same talking point about how Trump killed a, Iranian military leader, Qasem Soleimani, and that quelled the Iranian attacks. And actually, that's not true in terms of the number of attacks that happened after the assassination of Qasem Soleimani in Iraq. And it's also not true in terms of what I showed earlier, that the former general in charge of the Central Command who killed Qasem Soleimani isn't even trying to argue that it didn't increase the influence of Hassan Nasrallah, the head of Hezbollah in Lebanon, and decrease the influence of Iran itself on its own proxies that it had funded and weaponized and now can't completely control. And that's kind of why we're in the situation we are right now. But anyway, that's the last clip I'm going to show on my main topic of whether the U.S. is going to war with Iran. And I actually have a lot more faith in the Biden administration not getting us into a war with Iran than the Trump administration, which, as John Kirby pointed out in clip 9, was thinking about increasing, or like Mike Pompeo was looking at war plans, and Trump famously in the case against him, the criminal case against him for keeping classified documents and taking them down to Mar-a-Lago. There's an audio recording of him showing an invasion plan for Iran to some reporters who are writing a biography, maybe of Mike Pence. I can't remember who they were writing a biography of, but anyway, Trump obviously saved the war plans to invade Iran. And he's saying, but this was something that the generals were giving me. It's not me. I'm not the one who was going to bomb Iran. Or does anyone remember that whole bomb Iran thing? Am I the only one that still has that in my head? Anyway, like I said, that was the final clip in whether the U.S. is going to war with Iran. And my whole point that of all those clips is, if you want to avoid the United States getting into a direct war with Iran, vote for the Democrats, not the Republicans, because they have a totally bogus, skewed view of what it is that deters Iran from conflict, and it's not killing their military commanders when they're on a trip to Iraq, like what the Trump administration did with Qasem Soleimani. But anyway, the final newsmaker clip I want to show you is the one I promised before, where you're going to see George Stephanopoulos on This Week with George Stephanopoulos, totally disrespecting the senator from Ohio, Republican J.D. Vance. But he is kind of a total tool. You know, for my longtime viewers, there were like several weeks for my Sunday clip roundup where in the books behind me you would see the book that J.D. Vance wrote called Hillbilly Elegy. It was actually a kind of interesting book, and I read it, and I thought it was worth putting behind me here for several weeks. But then he and before he ran for Senate, he originally was like a never Trump, anti-Trump person. And that's something George Stephanopoulos brought up with him earlier in the interview. I'm not going to show, but down under sources in the video description, you can see the whole ABC This Week with George Stephanopoulos episode. Although you might have to like sign up for an ABC account or sign in with your cable provider or Hulu or I don't know, Disney, because I know Disney owns ABC. It's a whole rigmarole, but if you go through it, you could watch the whole episode and see that whole thing. And before this clip, George Stephanopoulos already shows his like total distaste for what J.D. Vance is saying in terms of Trump being found liable and having to pay E. Jean Carroll for defaming her and sexually abusing her. And that's the cross-examination I'm not showing you. And after J.D. Vance totally equivocates on that issue, this next clip, the final newsmaker clip I'm going to show you, starts, and you can see it starts with George Stephanopoulos like, okay, you don't care about the defamation and sexual abuse of E. Jean Carroll. Let's turn to what you said, that if you were you've been mentioned as a vice president for Donald Trump in the 2024 election. If you were vice president back in 2020, would you have certified the election? And J.D. Vance basically says no. but makes all these bogus claims that George Stephanopoulos cross-examines pretty well, and then moves to a second thing that J.D. Vance said, that, you know, if Trump is president again, he should, like, fire all the civil servants, and if the Supreme Court says he can't, he should just, like, say, like Andrew Jackson did, the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court has ruled they now need troops to enforce it, and basically saying that Trump should defy the Supreme Court. And J.D. Vance says, yeah, he should. J.D. Vance, even though I showed his book, Hillbilly Elegy, behind me for several weeks during my Sunday live clip roundup, I'm ashamed I did that, because he turned out to be such a partisan political tool of Donald Trump, which is pretty evident from the final newsmaker clip I'm going to show you and talk about with you a little more after we watch it together over here.
So you're not troubled by the sexual assault and defamation. Let me ask you about January 6th. You've been mentioned as a possible vice president for Donald Trump. Had you been vice president on January 6th, would you have certified the election results?
Oh, George, this is such a ridiculous question, in part because the law has changed here. We, of course, had
I didn't ask you about going forward. I asked you what you would have done. I asked you what you would have done.
George, here's what I think. Here's what I think happened in 2020. And I know you guys are obsessed with talking about this. I have to make a point here. You constantly say to people like me, why do you talk about January the 6th? Why do you talk about the election of 2020? And then you ask about us multiple times during a 6-minute interview. But look, you asked the question and I'll answer it. Do I think there were problems in 2020? Yes, I do. Do I think it was a problem that big technology companies working with the intelligence services censored the presidential campaign of Donald Trump? Yes. Do I think it's a problem that Pennsylvania changed its balloting rules in the middle of the election season in a way that even some courts in Pennsylvania have said was illegal? Yes, I think these were problems, George, and I think there is a political solution to those problems. So litigating which slate of electors was legitimate, I think, is fundamentally the political solution to the problems that existed in 2020. It's a reasonable debate to have, and I find it weird, George, that people like you obsess with what I call what happened in 2020. You're so incurious about what actually happened in 2020, which is why so many people mistrust our elections in this country. We've got to do better, George.
I'm not the least bit incurious. In fact, you laid out a litany there, but you didn't answer the question I asked. Would you have certified the election results had you been vice president?
If I had been vice president, I would have told the states like Pennsylvania, Georgia, and so many others that we needed to have multiple slates of electors, and I think the U.S. Congress should have fought over it from there. That is the legitimate way to deal with an election that a lot of folks, including me, think had a lot of problems in 2020. I think that's what we should have done.
So it's very clear you would have done what Donald Trump asked you to do there, not what Vice President Mike Pence did. You said that that's about the past, but of course it's Donald Trump. That's what you just said.
It's not about what Donald Trump asks somebody to do. It's about what do we do when you have a problem like what happened in 2020? How do you respond to it? How does the political system respond to this? You can't have a media apparatus that looks, for example, at the intelligence services working with technology companies to censor Americans and say, well, we just can't deal with this. There's no solution to this problem. And by the way, George, I don't want to talk about this stuff because I think what happened in 2020 is far, far less important than what's happened since 2020. The wide open southern border, the fentanyl crisis plaguing our communities, the inflation crisis that is making it hard for Americans to afford a good middle class lifestyle. We need to litigate the 2024 election about those issues. You guys are obsessed with talking about 2020. I'm happy to answer the questions, but I think it's a disservice to the American people that you're so preoccupied with it.
Well, it's the President Trump is preoccupied with it is too. He's the one who's talked about pardoning those who participated in the riots. And you did this answer the question. You would have refused to recertify the election. I do want to talk about the agenda for 2024 because you also have laid out very clear advice for what you want. Listen.
I think that what Trump should do, like if I was giving him one piece of advice, fire every single mid-level bureaucrat, every civil servant in the administrative state, replace them with our people. And when the courts, because you will get taken to court, and then when the courts stop you, stand before the country like Andrew Jackson did and say the Chief Justice has made his ruling, now let him enforce it.
Fire everyone in the government, then defy the Supreme Court. You think it's okay for the president to defy the Supreme Court?
No, George, I did not say fire everyone in the government. I said replace the mid-level bureaucrats with people who are responsive to the administration's agenda.
Every civil servant in the administrative state.
No, George, I said the mid-level bureaucrats, and one of the problems that we have in this government.
You said every civil servant in the administrative state.
Let me finish the answer, George. You asked the question. We have a major problem here with administrators and bureaucrats in the government who don't respond to the elected branches. Let's just give one very real-world example of this. In 2019, Donald Trump, having defeated ISIS, said that we should redeploy our troops in Syria and Jordan out of the region. You had multiple members of the Defense Department bureaucracy who fought him on that. So what happened? We have people who are sitting ducks in the Levant right now, 3 of whom just got killed because the bureaucrats aren't listening to the political branches. That's a fundamental component of our government, George, that whoever is in charge, agree or disagree with them, you have to follow the rules. If those people aren't following the rules, then of course you've got to fire them. And of course the president has to be able to run the government as he thinks he should. That's the way the Constitution works. It has been thwarted too much by the way our bureaucracy has worked over the past 15 years.
The Constitution also says the president must abide by legitimate Supreme Court rulings, doesn't it?
The Constitution says that the Supreme Court can make rulings, but if the Supreme Court, and look, I hope that they would not do this, but if the Supreme Court said the President of the United States can't fire a general, that would be an illegitimate ruling, and the President has to have Article 2 prerogative under the Constitution to actually run the military as he sees fit. This is just basic constitutional legitimacy. You're talking about a hypothetical where the Supreme Court tries to run the military. I don't think that's going to happen, George, but of course if it did, the President would have to respond to it. There are multiple examples throughout American history of the President doing just that.
You didn't say military in your answer, and you've made it very clear you believe the president can defy the Supreme Court. Senator, thanks for your time this morning.
No, George.
Roundtable's up next. We'll be right back.
And you saw I kept that running. That was not a hard break where George Stephanopoulos had to cut off the interview, and it actually went for like several more seconds into like blank space on my broadcast. So yeah, George Stephanopoulos, because I saw some people report that as well. George Stephanopoulos had to cut off J.D. Vance because it was a hard break. You know, that's when their software has put an ad in and there's nothing they can do to stop the ad, and so they have to stop the interview before the ad plays. But no, that is not. You saw George Stephanopoulos they showed like him just like sitting there looking down at his notes for several seconds after he cut off J.D. Vance because he was like sick of the ways he was like not answering the question and showing he was like a total partisan tool of Donald Trump. And by the way, for the live viewers, I put a link to the full transcript of ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos from last Sunday, where you can where you can see at the beginning of that interview, George Stephanopoulos actually asked J.D. Vance about how he used to be an anti-never Trumper and then totally became a partisan political tool of Donald Trump. And his answers are not much better than what I just showed in the last half of the interview, where George Stephanopoulos, I think, pretty much got sick of hearing it and cut him off. You can tell me what you think in the comment section. I did see at the end there that there were some good live comments from the 20 plus people who showed up for the live stream at this weird day and time, but I'm glad to finally get it broadcast because I was all ready to go on Monday, and Xfinity was like gave me this estimate that the internet would be restored at 3 p.m. on Monday, and then 6 p.m. on Monday, and then 9:15 p.m. on Monday. And then after that, they were just like, as soon as possible. And it didn't come back till like, what was it, like 1 or 2 p.m. on Monday. And so I started my live stream at like 2:30, and I appreciate those of you who showed up for that. This will become a recorded live stream. Everything seems to have gone okay. Thank you, Xfinity, for giving me the bandwidth to broadcast this finally on Tuesday, I guess. And I will be back every Monday all the way through January 2025. That's my commitment. If you want to support, I got a recorded show comment recently about like, are you not giving the sticker in the Constitution anymore? You like did a couple shows and didn't mention it. That's because I get tired of the e-begging. But actually, I'm about to get the 1099 miscellaneous from Google saying how much I earned from YouTube this last year, and it's like the lowest ever since I became a YouTube partner. It's like under $1,000 for the whole year. And then my Patreon income is also not that high. So basically, I'm just doing this live stream every Monday as a hobby for the next year, not because I'm getting any remuneration under capitalism. Shouldn't I be remunerated? I don't know. I guess it depends on whether you believe in capitalism or which way do you, are there like people who believe in capitalism who believe in remuneration and people who believe in remuneration? No, I think I said that wrong to begin with. I apologize for that. It's been a long couple days. I spent like an entire 24 hours like shivering under the covers without heat and power, and then 24 hours after that without internet. I didn't even get to watch all the cable news shows. So, I mean, I did see that the DC Circuit said that Trump doesn't have absolute immunity from criminal charges. And I don't know, I guess something like that could cause me to do some sort of video in between my Monday live streams. But uh, regardless of whether I do those live streams, I did want to say that if you give a $5 contribution, either at the link, there are two links under the video, one for a one-time contribution through PayPal, the other is a monthly contribution through Patreon. But if you give at least $5 and you give me a US shipping address, I will send you this hashtag, upside down, hashtag LiberalViewer weatherproof vinyl sticker, and this ACLU US Constitution that has a Know Your Rights with the Police section in the back. So yeah, that I almost lost my train of thought. But anyway, unless I have some other reason to upload a video, I'm thinking maybe I'll cut out part of this live stream that's already like 80 minutes long, like the part where I refute the Republican talking point that the Trump assassination of Qasem Soleimani showed strength and stopped Iranian attacks, but Biden's weakness is causing attacks, which is bogus. And I showed that in multiple clips. I might like cut that part out and make it a separate video. I don't know if any of you think that's a good idea, but you can let me know in the comment section. I'll see if I have time in the next couple days to do that. I just don't have time to do more than the live stream most weeks, but I just do a bunch of other stuff that maybe I'll talk about during the next 11 months. I continue the live stream, which, like I said, I promise to continue every Monday or maybe the occasional Tuesday like today, but like every week all the way through the inauguration, January 20th, 2025, when we get to not only see who was elected in November, but who actually like takes over the presidency, because it might not be the same person according to results we've seen in the past. That's why I'm going to keep doing the live stream all the way through January 2025. We can watch together. It's like the cliffhanger. cliffhanger to see how, American democracy turns out. Continues or doesn't continue. Anyway, until then, or until I have some other reason to upload a video, I guess I will be seeing all of you around the internet.